Come on.
And there we go. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Oh, I just love to say it. Coalition of Concerned Republicans. I love you guys. You guys are the absolute best. Welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. My name is Mike Levine. I'm here with my colleague, Chuck Benoit, who is pushing the buttons behind the scenes right now, producing this little broadcast. And what a day it is today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pretty sure that this audience is well aware that today is election day. I would guess that most of this audience has already voted, although I haven't. I'm about to go vote when this show's over and Chuck and I do our administrative work. After the conclusion of the show, I'll go vote. But we're going to talk about that today. So let's get Chuck on board here. Chuck, can you come on in?
Good morning, Michael.
Okay, Chuck, give us your opening little tidbits. Anything that we talked about before going live that you'd like to bring into the official version of this broadcast, or how would you like to proceed here, Chuck?
Well, yeah, I think what we kind of talked a little bit about was, the turnout and whether or not we're going to have a bit larger turnout or a not so large turnout, and who that might possibly benefit. And I think you mentioned some statistics as to what we had by the end of early voting, and after that, I pulled up on my computer. They're saying that we had about 14.2% of registered Florida voters having voted by the end of early voting. So that obviously sounds very, very low in turnout, but as I think you might have mentioned, it's actually pretty standard for primary elections. So the question is, who might benefit from this type of a turnout? And I think what we feel is that those who are the most connected to the government tend to do better. So people like Byron Donald or an Ashley Moody could probably benefit most by this low turnout, standard low turnout voting arrangement here. So what say you about that?
So basically, yeah, super. So what is the title of today's show, Chuck?
The title, let's see, I buried
that
that
handy?
somewhere. I can get that right up here. What will Florida be when the new administration is inaugurated?
Right. What will Florida, ladies and gentlemen, be? What will Florida be when the new new administration is inaugurated? Of course, it'll have a lot to do with who wins and who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's really critically important. I mean, this is a really hard ballot for me to vote. Chuck, I don't know how you feel about it, but I will tell you, this is a really hard ballot for me to vote, and it is going to determine the direction that Florida goes significantly, because if you take the top 5 candidates for governor, which we will do right now, I assume, Chuck, if you pick out those 5 candidates, the direction of the state will be markedly different depending on which one of them wins. Now, I'm sure we all have our assumption on who might win, but I'm encouraging the audience to vote in this particular election critically. I really believe in my heart, it's never been more critically important to vote your conscience as this election, because it's such a difficult ballot to vote, Chuck.
Yeah. Please don't just
Well,
vote
get
for
us
the
started,
guy.
Chuck. Let's go through it.
Please don't vote for the guy who you think is going to win.
Gonna win.
That's just
Exactly.
not
If you
going to
do
work.
that, we're screwed.
Right. And another point I
That gives
wanted
you a
to.
little insight to what I'm voting, what I'm doing, right?
There you go. There you go.
Alrighty
Another
then.
little point that I was thinking that I'd like to make. I wasn't sure where, but this might be a good time. You know what? If our gubernatorial candidate doesn't win, and the Byron Donald obvious choice for most people does win. What could be a win? And I keep thinking the best we can do possibly is to send a message. And if Byron Donald won but did not win with 50% of the Republican vote, that's about
which
the
I
only.
believe will be the outcome. I believe Byron Donalds will win, but I believe that Byron Donalds will not get 50% of the vote.
And can we consider that a win? So,
Hey, just that's the way it works, Chuck. There's no other possible outcome.
yeah.
If that happens, then he will advance to the general election. He'll run against whoever the Democrats' nominee is, which looks like David Jolly, and that's be what we have to do in the general.
Yeah.
So, Chuck,
So let's
let me
go
just
ahead and
point
start.
out right now. But let me just point out right now, as we tee into that subject, okay, what we talked about before. So we came on live. So I just want to point out, so we can cut to the chase and not drag this out. In my personal opinion, no matter what happens, growth management is the most important issue facing the state of Florida going into the new administration. Do you have any comments about that before we get started on the candidates, Chuck?
Yeah, well, I do feel that that is exactly what's going on. And, the Live Local Act is a precursor of that, and the idea that the state wants to take away from the county any authority regarding where that might be and how dense the populations might be. Yeah, I think that's going to be a very, very big aspect of it. And maybe second to that, even though a lot of people are probably more tuned into it, is the AI situation. What's going to
That's
happen
all
with
part of
that?
it, Chuck.
Yeah, which
AI
is
is
all
a
part of it. Yes.
component of growth management.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And we're not even talking about AI. We're talking about data centers. I mean, AI itself is a completely different subject
Yeah.
from
Well.
growth management, because you know what? You can put these data centers anywhere. Data centers are working off of satellites, right? Yeah, you're not hardwiring anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're shooting these signals to satellites, and satellites distributing all around the world. These places should be in the most remote places. Not to mention the fact that after you build them, the number of people required to run them is a very small number. So once you get through the construction jobs, the employment associated with data centers is low. So there's no benefit to the surrounding areas after these things are built. And keep in mind, the construction crews are going to come from elsewhere. They're not going to recruit construction crews from your local community to build these things. They're going to bring crews in from all over the country that already know what they're
Yep, I've
doing,
already done it. Yeah.
right? That's perfect business sense. Why wouldn't you do that if you're a corporation and you're in business to make money? Well, that's the best plan. Wouldn't you agree?
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so let's go.
So the big question here on the floor is, what's Florida going to look like if, let's say, Jay Collins actually won the
Yeah.
primary?
Wow. It's interesting that we start off with Jay Collins, because I really respect Jay Collins. I ran into Jay Collins a few times when I was lobbying in the legislature, and he was pretty low key, very calm, relaxed kind of a guy in that setting. But since he's been on that, like, for example, when, let's see, Patrick Bet David, big time influencer, had Paul Renner, James Fishback, and Collins on his show for the only well, not the only, but the only debate I saw. Okay. Collins became pretty aggressive and pretty defensive. Okay. And my takeaway from that is, and keep in mind, I hate to use this reference, but it is such a direct correlation. Can I avoid it? Because I don't want to pick a fight with anybody. But, I'm just going to say that in the military, people do what they're told. That is the modus operandi of the military. But that's not the case in government. The legislature, as Ron DeSantis will tell you, does not have to do what the governor wants them to do. So, Mike, I would be very concerned about how Jay Collins deals with a antagonistic legislature, okay? Because military tactics don't work in that environment, Chuck.
There you go. Well, let's just move along. Next one down the list is Byron Donald, and as we know, Byron does not feel like the 2020 election was stolen, and that is a criteria on the Michael Levine checklist
Litmus
for.
test. Litmus test.
Yeah, there's the litmus test. So what happens when I would assume the first thing is that we don't really talk too much about election integrity.
Other than the fact that he's endorsed by Trump, and election integrity is a big deal for Trump. So you might find that Donalds is not married to his position on election integrity and he does a complete flip flop, which I would fully expect, which would be great, actually. But that just goes to the character of Byron Donalds, right? He's going to do what's politically in his best interest. Okay. His benefactor is Donald Trump, and he's going to do what he needs to do to accomplish, what, Donald Trump's agenda, and Donald Trump is a Floridian, Chuck. And that's a huge, big deal.
Yeah.
Even after Trump is out of office, he's still is a Floridian. And do you think that Donald Trump will have a lot to say about what the governor of the state of Florida, who he, just like DeSantis, he endorsed DeSantis, very low probability of DeSantis being the governor, and he became the governor. I would suggest there's a very low probability that Byron Donalds would be in the situation he's in if Donald Trump didn't endorse him. So Donald Trump owns that governor. And when Donald Trump's out of office, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants. He's a private citizen. So will he have a lot of influence over Byron Donalds? I would suggest he will. Because you know what? I think the next president of the United States, Donald Trump, will have a lot of influence over the next president of the United States. Think about those situations. Who might be the next president, and will they be beholden to Donald Trump? And the answer, in my view, hopefully, is yes.
Yeah,
Chuck?
absolutely. Yeah. So
Let me say to you, though, Chuck, before we move on from Byron,
okay.
I'm going to go back to what we said in the opening. Under Byron Donalds as our governor, growth management is now the absolute most important subject for the state of Florida. And then I want to refer back to, and I'm going to call my friend out, Allison Strange, who's a city council member in Clermont, which is the highest rate of growth in Lake County. Okay. So, for the audience outside of Lake County, this could be going on in your neighborhood too. I'm sure it is, because how could it not be, given the usurpation of local rule over land use? Okay. It has to be happening in your place too. But let's use our example here in Lake County that we know about. Allison Strange just posted on Facebook a lengthy post that said basically that density belongs in cities, and county commissioners are responsible for protecting agricultural land and preservation land. And I'm going to tell you right now, Chuck, I couldn't agree more. And for the audience, if you're interested, put a note in the comments. I'll be happy to send you my land use equilibrium paper that agrees with what Allison said completely. And I published it a year ago. I don't know how long ago, Chuck, but it's been several
Been a
months.
while, yeah.
It's been a while, right? Could be a year, but maybe not. So that's critically important, coming from a sitting city council woman in the fastest, and really, anyway, in the fastest growing city in Lake County, and probably one of the fastest growing areas in the state, Chuck.
There we go. So what happens if James Fishback manages to get the nomination?
Ooh, that's going to be a big deal, right? It's interesting. Obviously, Chuck, let's talk about turnout real quick as it relates to Fishback, right?
Yeah.
So low turnout is not good for James Fishback, right? Low turnout is not going to work in Fishback's favor. He's got to turn out young people big time. So the question is, are young people more likely to vote by mail or early, or are they more likely to vote on election day? Do you have a speculation, Chuck?
Do I have a speculation? I would
Do you
guess that
think?
I
Go
would
ahead.
guess they would vote on election day because they just kept putting it off.
That could be. That could be. I would suggest they'd probably vote early because they can get into their schedule and they can just drop by whenever they want. And they also not restricted to a particular precinct to vote.
That's
They can
true.
pop in
Yeah.
at any of the precincts in their county and vote. So anyway, we don't know really, right?
Right.
So I'm just saying to you that if we get, and this is what it's shaping up as, Chuck, as you pointed out, as I pointed out prior to coming on camera, and then you pointed out, we both agreed. I said 14, you said 14.2 because you had a better number than me.
Well, I just
And then,
looked it
yeah, I
up.
got it. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's the point. That's what I'm saying. So your number is verified by some agency out there. So we're close, and we're 0.2 off, right? So we're really close. So we're looking at a typical turnout, 22 to 24% voter turnout. That's probably what we're going to get. I doubt it's going to go to 28. I'd be surprised if it goes to 28. But Fishback must have, the higher the turnout, the better the odds of Fishback winning, Chuck. And
Yeah, we can
and
say
then
that for a lot of the others as well.
we can say that for all of the others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I would suggest
All right.
all of the others. Okay.
Okay.
So what is the government? What is Florida going to be under James Fishback, right? And James Fishback is going to have. That's going to be. You will see the most tumultuous relationship between the governor's office and the legislature that I've ever seen in my lifetime. But if James Fishback, if he becomes governor, and if he's true to his platform, Chuck, because there's a lot of stuff that James Fishback is saying that the Florida legislature is not going to go along with. So you'll find, like, that's 4 years, right? I mean, the term for the governor is 4 years. So you're going to get 4 years, possibly, of a completely hamstrung legislature because the governor will not sign. He will veto, and then the legislature can have to come back and override gubernatorial vetoes. That's the dogfight that we'll be in for the next 4 years if James Fishback wins and is true to his platform. So that's going to be really tumultuous, even though, and keep in mind, if that happens, you've got all the chambers of government, the House, the Senate, and you're going to have a Republican governor and a Republican cabinet. And still, under 100% Republican control of the Florida legislature and the executive branch, you're going to have a very contentious political environment in Florida for 4 years under James Fishback, Chuck.
Okay. Well, let's pass by a few of these people who are on the ballot as resume enhancements, and let's drop down to Paul Renner. So Paul Renner, if I recall correctly, was possibly your choice.
Yes. Well, again, I'm not, I don't want to turn this show into a campaign show for Paul Renner, but I think Renner, he's got the experience of being Speaker of the House, number one. Number two, he has repeatedly on the campaign trail admitted that he made some mistakes, or, he certainly didn't support a lot of the, let's face it, he passed the Live Local Act into law.
Yeah.
Under his leadership. And he knows that's a problem for a lot of people, not just grassroots voters, but city councils and county commissioners and all that other stuff too. So he gets that. But the good news is that he gets it. And I will tell you, as I've said before in this broadcast, I've talked to Paul Renner face to face, like probably 3 times on the campaign trail. And he told me that he was very willing to repeal the Live Local Act.
Yeah, I was
So-
with you on one of those occasions, so I can attest to that.
So
Yeah.
that's true, right, Chuck? You go verify that he did in fact say that at an RPOF quarterly meeting, by the way. And that was trip number 1. That's when we brought the subject up. And then we got into a big conversation with him on housing and stuff like that. And he was listening. So, and not to mention the fact that he has the experience of navigating the legislature, point number 1. Of course, the Speaker of the House crosses over and deals with the President of the Senate, and that's how we got Live Local, by the way. And he understands the relationship between the legislature and the governor and the governor's office and the cabinet. So I think that Paul Renner is equipped to do the job, Chuck.
There you go. Well, I don't really want to be overly put off this, but we're going to just drop down to Bobby Williams for our last candidate in the governor's race. What are your thoughts? What kind of a Florida would we have with a Bobby Williams governor?
I like Bobby Williams. Again, no elected experience, which is fine. Rick Scott didn't have any elected experience when he became our governor. Donald Trump didn't have any elected experience when he became the president of the United States. So I'm not going to hold that against Bobby Williams. So what's going to happen there, if Bobby Williams gets elected, then we're going to have a lot of theoretical debates between the governor's office and the legislature. And we're going to find out if anyone can actually be persuaded, Chuck, because special interests are persuading the legislature every day, or you could say that differently. The legislature takes their orders from special interests. So there is no persuasion going on. We wrote you a check, deliver the product. That's the relationship between special interests and the legislature. You put Bobby Williams in place as a governor, and he's going to be very theoretical about the governance of the state of Florida. And he's going to give you a lot of stuff that I would argue, right? That we're a Judeo-Christian nation. We need to have Judeo-Christian laws. Bobby Williams supports, he funds with his own money, charitable organizations, feeding the poor, housing for homeless people. I mean, he's going to really focus on, the people in the state of Florida that need support, as opposed to, ponying up resources for special interests who are pretty much already pretty fat and wealthy. So that's going to be a big rub between the governor's office and the legislature. And I think Bobby Williams will attempt to be kind and gracious to them, and he'll find out that that's not a great, that does, they're not going to be sympathetic to his point of view. So then you're going to get into the whole back and forth between the legislature and the governor's office, is if you'll do this for me, I'll do this for you. And you'll start the horse trading going back and forth. But Bobby, I don't know, that's going to be a really tough situation, which I had this conversation a couple of times with Bobby Williams on the campaign trail too. And of course, Bobby Williams says that God called him to run, and that's the reason that he ran. And this is in God's hands, and we'll see what happens here. That's what he says when you talk to him about it. So that's what I say, right? I say, yep. Bobby Williams was inspired by God to run. And if he wins, I would say that there could possibly be a little divinity in that event, Chuck.
There you go. Well, it sounds to me like using one of your phrases, median household income families might benefit from a Bobby Williams win.
And I'm all for that.
So now we still have a few minutes left, and we're going to kind of run through a couple of more of these races. CFO, Frank William College. What would Florida look like with Frank William College as our CFO?
Well, the CFO office will probably be a lot less robust, let's just say, because it's hard to be more robust than Blaise Ingoglia, right? Blaise Ingoglia is a robust individual. I've known Blaise since 2010. And, Blaise is a powerhouse when it comes to messaging. So you won't get that out of Frank College, I don't believe. You'll get a much more ministerial chief financial officer's office. You'll get a guy who's an administrator, and he'll work through his people. He will not be a camera hound. You won't see Frank College setting up his run for governor or whatever else that might motivate him. So I think you're going to get a much quieter CFO's office, a lot more of what you are accustomed to, because really not too many CFOs play a leading role in the cabinet, in the governor's agenda. But Blaise Ingoglia has come out and specifically said that when he is elected to the CFO's office, you're going to get a CFO's office like you've never had before. You're going to get a CFO leading from the front, trailblazing. No pun intended, Blaise. But so that's Frank. I think Frank is smart enough to do the job and all that kind of thing. But you're going to get a much less robust CFO's office under Frank College than you'll get under Blaise Ingoglia, Chuck.
Well, I'm going to assume that you pretty much handle both of those candidates in the same comment. So let's
Well,
move
the
to,
only other thing left would be to say about that on the
okay.
Blaise and Goglia side is what's Blaise's next step? Because everything Blaise does is a political building block for his political career. So, I told Blaise that he should run for governor before this whole thing, before the field starts filling out. I told Blaise that, hey, Byron was already endorsed by Trump and there weren't a lot of other candidates in the race. I told Blaise he should run for governor, which would be appealing. So he had a reason not to. And keep in mind, I want to remind you, Chuck, as we get into the Secretary of Agriculture race, that Wilton Simpson fully intended to run for governor until Trump endorsed Donalds. And Simpson was politically smart enough to know that he could not overcome the Trump endorsement of Donalds. So he's not in the governor's race. He's running for another term as Secretary of Agriculture, Chuck.
Well,
That is a key point.
and so let's talk about it. Wilt Simpson versus Matt the Welder Taylor.
There you go.
What will we get with Matt the Welder?
I think that you'll see. I think that we'll take, to be honest, I'm just going to be straightforward on this. I think that under Matt the Welder Taylor, we'll take a lot better care of our lakes. We'll take a lot better care of our streams and waterways. And I think you'll get, provided he can he can shepherd this through the legislative process. But a lot of that stuff is once you get in as a Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Agriculture sets the agenda under the governor's leadership, and then he's an executive. So he walks this thing out the way he feels, the way he wants to, and the way he is able to. So I think that under Matt the Welder Taylor, you're going to get an administration that takes better care of our waterways and preservation areas than you will under Wilton Simpson, because Wilton Simpson's already been there. And I don't see any particular improvement well, that could be harsh, but let's just say I don't think it's Wilton Simpson's first priority to, like, for example, let me just make this point clearly, okay? If you're the Secretary of Agriculture and one of your top priorities is the quality of our environment, then you would be pushing back against a lot of the high density development that the legislature's been running through. And he's had every opportunity to do that. He's sponsored legislation himself through the legislature. And he has not demonstrated to my satisfaction that taking care of our natural resources is his first priority. If it was, he'd be pushing back against some of this land use stuff, and he's not. Okay. So that's my point on that, Chuck.
Okay. Well, that
So we
kind
can move on
of
from
takes
agriculture if you want.
that takes care of the statewide elections. We only have just a few minutes. I think what I'd like to jump down to real quick is the Board of County Commissioners. We have two up for re-election, and although we've said several times on several broadcasts that we really do feel like there should be term limits, and both of the commissioners who are running for re-election have been in that position for many, many years. Yet we're still not ready to change that out. We're looking for both Sean Parks and Leslie Campione to maintain their position. Is that a fair assessment?
Chuck, this is all about the political machine, right? This is the thing I'm going to term it, that, Chuck, that I'm going to just basically label this whole conversation as election interference, right? So when you get elected officials piling on, gang tackling is my word, and endorsing a particular candidate, then that is election interference. The voters are misled. The resources available to candidates is completely incongruent, and it makes it really difficult for the word to even get out. And there's a lot we could do to improve the election process. So as we look at these veteran candidates, Leslie Campione and Sean Parks, you can't ignore the institutional knowledge that they bring to the job. But the fact is, no credible candidate is going to run against these guys. They're not. I mean, these are institutions in Lake County now. So you're not going to get a credible candidate, in my view, running against either one of these two who have been in office for 16 years now. So my point would be that these two need to respect the county and they need to not run. Okay. And that would, when you have an open seat, this is the crux of my comment right here. When you have an open seat, then you'll get credible candidates running for that open seat. But when credible candidates have to run against a seasoned incumbent with huge name recognition across the county and years of track record, which hopefully that's good, right? But again, how many people actually follow the county commission meetings and what gets done there and what doesn't? But my point would be that until Leslie Campione and Sean Parks respect the voters and voluntarily step down so that someone else can pick up the torch and have an opportunity to lead, the people that challenge these candidates are not in the best interest of the county, in my opinion. And we just can't, does institutional knowledge trump, no pun intended, our need and desire for term limits? And until these candidates are willing to give that up, Chuck, I think that they're going to continue to serve, which, I agree with a lot, in both cases. I think that overall, Sean and Leslie both do a pretty good job, except that there are times, for whatever reason, that they do stuff that, and nobody agrees 100% of the time. So there are times, when they do things that you're not going to like. And I think no matter who you put into those jobs, you're going to get that. And of course, I just want to say this out loud, that our elected officials believe that the letter of the law, legalism, is the way we govern, and that morality is not their barometer. And that is a structural problem that we have in American politics all over the place. I think the vast majority of elected officials believe that as long as they don't break the law, they can do whatever they want. And I totally oppose that point of view, Chuck.
Well, Mike, we are out of time. There were a few more races we could have gotten into, but I think what's going to happen is Thursday we're going to be sorting all this out from the other side of
Hopefully, it's a lot of work, as you know. I mean, honestly, this is where you really need a tech guy or somebody to really help you and just import the data that comes out of these precincts so that we can run them into heat maps and stuff like that. So we'll see if we can find any tech people that'll help us really micro down into these races and see what's going on. But that's what we need to do. So we'll see what happens. Election day will end this evening at 7 o'clock, and then we probably will get numbers back pretty quickly. The state of Florida is reputedly delivers pretty quick results. So then we have, really, I guess I'm not going to be working on that tonight, Chuck. I don't know about you, but I guess we'll have Wednesday, and then Thursday morning we'll come back with some kind of an assessment of what happened, Chuck.
There we go. Well, do you have any final remarks?
My final remark I just really made, I just want to go back and say that until our elected officials use morality and natural law as their guiding principles, then we'll always have problems between the government and the population, Chuck.
Well, thank you so much, Mike Levine, and thank you all for tuning in to our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at Restore Our Rep 76, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program, and remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.